Traveling the Vortex.
We join the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and arrive at episode 472. And this podcast is just like a key, and keys are just keys until you slip one into the correct lock. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How are you guys?
Pretty good.
So if we're a key, what's the correct lock?
That's the question. And then with a single turn, all sorts of things can be unleashed. Just like with this podcast.
Did you guys do anything fun this week?
Mel and I finished a rewatch of the Harry Potter films. That was fun.
Nice.
Had been a while since, gone back and done all 8 of them. 8? Yeah, 8.
10 if you count Fantastic Beasts.
We didn't this time around.
Keith, did you do anything this week?
Not that I can think of.
Oh my.
What about you, Glenn?
I watched Enlightenment, and in fact, because I had read the novelization last week, this week I decided to pick up the video off the shelf, and I put it in and realized that I had never watched the special edition, which is the omnibus version with new special effects and a new cut, and then they've formatted it so it's 16 by 9 as well. I really
feels a little more
it.
movie-like.
Yeah, it was very more cinematic, and I think they tweaked the music a little bit. There are some music swells that I don't remember or don't think they not that they didn't fit or they felt out of place, but they weren't exactly what you would expect from 80s Doctor Who. And so I wonder if maybe they were little musical inserts for maybe a little more dramatic emphasis. But it was good. I really enjoyed it. I'd forgotten how much I liked that particular story. I still maintain Mark Strickson is just a tad over the top in his performance in it, but it's Turlough, so you give him a pass, I guess. All right, well, let's talk about the news. What was in the news this week?
Well, today, actually, on Veterans Day, 11/11, Doctor Who has resumed filming for Series 13.
Yay!
It comes with some slightly sad news that they don't expect to do a full 11-episode season.
Yeah.
They're expecting an 8-episode season because of COVID protocols. It takes so much longer to film every episode. What's interesting about this is that they expect to film 8. It's possible they might not film 8.
Right.
It's possible they may film more.
Right. Well, it's possible that they may film less, and I think that's why they framed it that way, because I don't think they want to get anybody's hopes up in case things get even worse. But right now they're working under, certain rules and conditions as far as COVID goes. So.
Okay, so now the question in my mind.
Now, let me back that up real quick. That's only 4 fewer than we normally get. So when you think of it that way, it's only 4 fewer than we normally get.
That just means less filler, not as good episodes.
Yeah, well, maybe. Let's hope.
That's the question. When you are planning a 12-episode season, which we, and that may not have even been, because I think, wasn't it last year we only got 10?
That's what it's only been with Whittaker was 10.
With Whittaker is 10.
With the special.
So that's
where 11 comes from.
2 or 3 less. But when it suddenly becomes that, it's like, okay, so now where do you as the showrunner make that break? Do you go and cull episodes that might be too cost prohibitive, expensive, location shoot affairs because of the COVID protocols? Or do you call one maybe that you weren't happy with that needs to cook a little bit longer? Or do you put the big 2-part finale on hold and go, well, it'll just be the opener for next season? There's so many different ways that could fall.
I agree. I would think that the latter is probably the least likely, because I think you want your series to kind of go out on a high point. So I don't think you hold what would effectively be a season finale to open your next season. I think that would be foolish. I also think one of the things that I think encourages me of them only doing 8 episodes is not only the fact that we might get 8 really good episodes instead of, 8 really good episodes and 2 subpar ones, but also I think that when they probably, because they budget so far out, they've probably already budgeted ahead, and they probably have a full 10 week or 10 episode budget. Which, I think you might be onto something that might cost a little more because of COVID restrictions. There might be more they have to do, more precautions they have to take.
If it takes longer to film every episode, it's going to cost more money.
So, but I think that gives you a chance of really having some, knockout great effects, because if you spend, I wouldn't want it to come at the expense of a story. But if a lot of that stuff is done in seclusion when you don't have actors around, so it might, we might see some really, really pretty cool special effects this year. We were always seeing, I think, already great production quality as far as special effects go. So that might improve too with, fewer episodes having to be done. Not to mention that cuts down on the time that you have to get them done. If you're working on 10 or even 11 episodes, if you're putting the Christmas one in that block or the holiday one in that block, that's a lot less time you have to work on special effects. So maybe 8 would give them more time, especially if they're taking longer to actually film and stuff too.
Right. Yeah, let's say for the sake of argument that you're going to New Zealand and you finally got Peter Jackson on board to direct one. Now, New Zealand's not going to let anybody in during a pandemic. That's kind of their thing. So it's like, oh, well, I guess that one's getting cut from this season. Do you then take all the money you would have spent flying your crew to New Zealand and go, episode 5 could use some more visual effects. Yeah, let's spend the money there.
If there was something like that planned, I'm sure that would probably be the case. Well, and I would think also, they expect to film 8. They don't know how many they'll actually get to film. So hopefully, I would imagine they would schedule their filming a little differently this year, where they make sure they get the premiere and the season finale and anything that might tie the two together done in the meantime, or get those done first and then tackle kind of the standalone episodes.
Mm-hmm.
That way, in case they only get 7 made, the overall story doesn't get hurt at all.
And thank goodness, in a way that the pandemic happened during Chibnall's run versus Moffat, because, can you imagine trying to trim a handful of episodes out of a Moffat season, which is all one big long arc?
Well, last season was a lot more heavy on the arc than the season before, so
that's true. That's very true.
It could go either way with Chibnall. And maybe he knew going into writing this season that, okay, we got COVID starting to happen, so we may not get to film everything, so let's not do a big story arc.
The only thing I have in reaction to your Steven Jackson or Peter Jackson analogy is the expanse of your fantasy and dream world astounds me sometimes.
He said he would do it for Dalek.
10 years ago.
Yeah, and the standing offer.
He doesn't live in New Zealand, does he? Couldn't he just come to wherever they are?
I think that was the other part of the deal, is that they had to go to him. But
I don't.
It's not like he lives in Middle Earth, Glenn. He is available. And think of the ratings. Think of coming back to the BBC and saying, "Look, you're going to market this as directed by Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson." I mean, come on. I give him a Christmas special if it's me. We're going to knock them Strictly Come Dancing folk right off their pedestal.
Well, and the Radio Times presumes that the series will probably return in the autumn of 2021.
Well, and that's kind of, I think, reading between the lines a little bit on this, all this news, is the fact that, they say expected. They could be hedging their bets that, they might make less, but the way they phrase it, it's also, why wouldn't they just say, we're beginning production on the season, and when we're done with it, no matter how long it takes. makes it seem like they have a deadline of when they need to be done so it can be on the air by a certain time.
Well, yeah, and this isn't out of character either because they have started around this time in the past for autumn releases as well. So,
yeah.
I would say it's a safe bet just from the, if they're just now getting around to filming, I don't see it happening that we're going to get a March episode. You know what I mean? It's just...
Oh, yeah.
No, I wouldn't. In fact, I was a little surprised by, well, I guess maybe not autumn. Autumn could be anywhere up until November, or even mid-December. But I was thinking autumn was earlier than I had sort of expected, especially since they hadn't started shooting. But autumn is probably right around because October is probably a achievable goal for them. Especially
I'm going to say Easter
episodes.
Saturday in September.
Halloween Sunday.
Oh, there you go. I'm all right with that.
That's a good one.
What else we got?
Echoes of Extinction has been delayed.
Which, if you don't know,
because of COVID.
This is the Time Lord Victorious edition. That's the two-sided vinyl that Big Finish is doing in collaboration with Demon Records and ASDA, and they're pressing that on a two-sided vinyl with the Doctor, I think the 8th Doctor on one side and the 10th Doctor on the other side. And they have said due to UK restrictions imposed by the coronavirus pandemic, in agreements with BBC and Big Finish, they've decided to postpone the release. The limited edition vinyl LP adventure was originally due to be in selected ASDA stores from November 27th of this year, with a digital download from Big Finish on the website about a week afterwards. They say in light of UK government advice against the sale of non-essential items, the release date has now been scheduled till early February. And if anybody's wondering why Big Finish wouldn't go ahead and release this a week after that 27th date anyway, I think they've got an agreement, obviously, with Demon Records ASDA because it was an exclusive to them. And so in order to, to follow the agreement with that, the digital download obviously is being delayed as well because ASDA, this would have been this is their inclusion. Big Finish has a lot of opportunities as far as including Time Lord Victorious, and in fact, they've already got some in there. So this gives ASDA a chance to have first dibs essentially before it gets released on download. So which I completely agree with, and I think that's appropriate because everybody's put a lot of work into this big crossover event, and I think everybody deserves to reap the rewards as well.
I agree.
Indeed.
There is some good news out of Big Finish, though. Keith, this is right up your alley.
I still haven't listened to the first volume, so I don't know if it is yet. I don't know if he does a good enough job. It's the Doctor Chronicles, 11th Doctor, Volume 2 is coming out September 2021, where the 11th Doctor is played by Jacob Dudman. Dudman, right?
I think that's right, yeah. Or Dude.
I need to listen to Volume 1. I'm not sure how I feel about it, These Big Finish adventures where the Doctor isn't played by the main actor, I'm sometimes on the fence on.
I say boo to this news.
Why is that?
Building off of the conversation that we had over in the Facebook group, I say boo to this. I think if it is an actor that has passed and we need to recast in order to tell a story, okay. If it is an actor that is still tied up under contract with the BBC, okay. I lean more on the side of perhaps we should wait to tell this story, but I can understand recasting. If it's an actor who just flatly refuses to return to the role, okay, I put my fan disappointment aside and I can be in favor of recasting. If it's an actor we just haven't gotten around to yet,
well, I think I've always sort of been okay when I thought these were framed around the more of an audio story rather than an audio drama.
And they are a
where
bit
it's
more.
being presented in the sense. Well, that's what I wonder about, though, because these are now that I read these, it's full cast audio dramas, how they're billed, which to me, a full cast audio drama is a lot like the Big Finish that we get from the classic Doctors, where there's not a lot of narration in between. I've always felt that if they frame these around somebody telling a story, and even if they portray the Doctor in a way that, emulates them, then I'm okay with it. But and it's really hard for me to judge either of these box sets, because I'm the same way. I haven't listened to the first one as well. But if they are presented in such a way where they are full cast audio dramas, and it's doesn't have that linking narration of telling a story with actors providing the dialogue, then yeah, I kind of have a problem with that as well, a little bit.
I think I listened to the first Ninth Doctor one, and there was linking narration and one other co-star per story. And I think that's how this one's going to be done too, because there's only 4 other people in the stories.
And there are 4 stories in that box set.
And there are 4 stories. So typically that's one other actor per box set. So it's a bit more like a companion chronicle.
See, I'm okay with that.
The character narrating that.
I'm okay with that, because I think the companion chronicles are done very well. And now you give the companion chronicles a pass, because often, and not always, but often, they're the companion themselves and the actor or actress that played them in the past doing those. And so when they're doing the performance of other characters that are familiar, you kind of give them a pass, because it's like telling from that character's perspective. But when it's coming from another character's perspective, or another actor portraying a different character from a different perspective, then that kind of gets a little muddled. But
and that's the difference between the Chronicles versus the 10th Doctor Chronicles versus the 10th Doctor Adventures.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
the same thing for when the 9th Doctor comes and does his box set. It'll be the 9th Doctor Adventures,
right?
Not the 9th Doctor Chronicles. So it is slightly different.
And that's what I've always
still need to know how good of a job he does.
I'm actually
the guy who did 9th Doctor, I wasn't overly impressed by.
So here's the thing, though. If it is being presented to me as an audio book per se, or an audio telling, and they don't get the Doctor dead on, I'm very much forgiving of it. It doesn't matter to me that they don't sound exactly like him, as long as they put forth a great effort. If they are, like, let's say Tim Treloar was not a even passable or adequate 3rd Doctor, that would bother me. But fortunately for us, he actually does a very good job as the 3rd Doctor. Did I say 4th Doctor? I meant 3rd Doctor. So I'm okay with him portraying the 3rd Doctor in those audios, especially since the actor's passed. So.
Well, and that's an odd situation where it started as linking narration from him and moved away from that, where it was just more a full-blown audio drama.
Right. We'll see. Time will tell, I guess.
In Big Finish we trust, I guess.
It looks like that's the end of the news. Well, shall we move on to our review?
The Wintertime Paradox. Did you know that Davros and the Doctor met for 3 Christmases on different planets across time and space? Have you heard the one about the time the Plasmavores came to pay a festive visit, or when Madame Vastra fought a cyborg? A perfect collection for the bleakest and sometimes brightest time of year. These are the tales to get you halfway out of the dark. This thrilling anthology presents a fantastic collection of adventures through time and space, featuring the best-loved characters and places from the Doctor Who world.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm so glad to hear that, because I really enjoyed this book. I think what I like the best about it is that it is an anthology piece, and even though they're all written by the same author, David Rudden, or Dave Rudden, I think that helps with the consistency of the style of writing. I think it works really good. There are some stories in this collection that are better than others, and we should flag the spoiler warning here. There's probably going to be some spoilery information on this, so if you haven't read the book, we highly recommend that you do. So I don't imagine we'll, do any super major spoilers, but just be warned that there's a good chance that we may spoil something for you. But as I was saying, though, I think that there are a lot of great ideas in a lot of these stories. So should we step through them one by one?
Just speaking on the book overall, what's impressive is the fact that, yes, it's the same author throughout all of it, and while the tone remains the same throughout, each story has its own unique voice and almost feels like it's written by somebody else.
That I agree with. I was reminded not so much as the when we did the for the 50th anniversary, the little ebooks that were done for each Doctor, each one by a different author, just in that those all had kind of a different flavor to them that each author brought to the table with the way their stories were told. And even though there's definitely a concurrent thread of familiarity that runs throughout these, I still feel like with each story that was told, there was a slightly different style at work that kind of molded itself to each particular set of circumstances.
I would agree, and I think what helps that is that they don't, while a lot of the stories feature the Doctor isn't the main lead in many of these, and they're told from different perspectives. You've got companions that play a greater role in a couple of the stories. You have a few stories that just don't have the Doctor at all in them, and then you have some stories that do, and some stories that come from the more of the angle or perspective of the villains or the bad guys. And so I think because the stories are framed in such a way that there's a bend on the perspective. I think that's what gives them all sort of a different feel and a different style in the storytelling. But I think the writing is very consistent as far as how well they're written. But I agree. I think each one of them almost has its own flavor or tone. Well, should we step through these one by one and maybe just talk a little about each one? There are 12 stories total.
Yes.
First one is He's Behind You, and this one features Rose and the 10th Doctor.
I really enjoyed this one. I thought this was a great way to kick off the story. Or the anthology. It was fun. It was full of adventure and just a bit of a hoot just to read through it all.
I think it is. It's a good way to start because it has because like you say, it's a more of a fun, upbeat story. There's a lot of action and peril in it, but there's also a lot of humorous moments, especially setting up Rose to be the one that's mistaken as the Time Lord expert for this Christmas play. For this play, this History of the Time Lords performance that's being put on. I thought that was really kind of funny to put that in that situation.
And just the idea that somewhere in the galaxy there's a panto happening about the Time Lords, I think is...
and not quite getting it exactly right.
Yeah. Because who could? I mean, no one could really get it truly right anyway, so I'm sure they're taking great liberties with it.
Right. I think Rose is treated really well in this too, of giving her because it puts her in the lead of this story, and it puts her in more of the hero status. Now, the 10th Doctor does come in, help save the day, but it's almost a little comical in the sense that the story is framed around the idea that Rose was in a school play and forgot her lines, and she's been traumatized by this all of her life, and then she gets put in a situation where she has to take to the stage and do this performance, and it's almost this, what are these kind of stories where it's it's not a self-fulfilled prophecy, but it's like help me out here, there's stories where you put they kind of bookend them in these situations where you have to overcome something. That's what it is. You kind of have to overcome something in your past.
It's a little bit of the the man who's convinced he's going to die tomorrow will probably find a way to make it happen. It's not necessarily a paradox, because when you say that, obviously, and we're dealing with Doctor Who, well, that's one thing.
It's a completely different situation.
But certainly a large amount of foreshadowing with the previous backstory of what happened to Rose is now going to come into play.
Right.
And this is one that there's so much to like here. The kind of ridiculousness of the panto itself, and just automatically says, okay, this is going to be a farce. The return of autons, and who in and of themselves can be a rather comical villain. We've got Rose and the 10th Doctor. We've got this phenomenal theater that I just kind of had the images of the opera from Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, I sort of had that idea, but maybe
epic.
even bigger than that.
Yeah. I mean, planet-wide stuff, and there's so many little nifty, cool things to like in this. And as it went, something was souring me on it, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, because there's a lot to like here, and I almost hate to even mention it, but I think it was because it was Rose.
Oh, of course.
And I don't want to be that guy. I really genuinely don't. I know you guys are going to pull out the you're just poking it with a stick because you can, and it's like, no, I don't want to be that. Well, it made sense that it had to be Rose because of the Auton connection. You needed somebody familiar with them.
Yeah, well, I think that's why it works for Rose, because she's already had a run-in with the Autons, so she's familiar enough with them.
Normally, I'm right with you, Sean, but I actually did enjoy Rose in this one. I liked kind of the inner dialogue of her not being too sure about the 10th Doctor still, because we didn't get a lot of that on the show itself. She pretty much grabbed his hand and ran, and we didn't see her doubt anything after that. So I liked seeing that and seeing her being a little unsure still about it. So I thought they handled
Barcelona
her really well.
clip. That was about it.
Yeah,
it wasn't even. That was Red Nose Day or something. I don't remember what clip that was. What day it was for, but.
I also think this keeps Rose in check as far as what she's capable of doing, especially at this time. This isn't, end of series, 4, where she's the gun-toting, Dalek killer. But it's really in perspective of her, and it's limiting in such, it's within her scope, I think, of where she is as a character at this point. So I think that's why this works really well for her. She's much more in line with the season 1 Rose than she is season 2 Rose. Well, or early season 2 Rose, as you said,
early.
not quite used to, the 10th Doctor yet.
And the two of them aren't so cocky and so self-sure of themselves.
Right. We aren't, what is it? By the time we get to Idiot's Lantern, we're very much in that zone.
Yeah.
I also like the fact that these Autons have been doing these roles for so long that they've gotten lost in the part. I thought that's kind of an interesting take on the Autons that I don't think has ever been.
It's a nice call forward to Pandorica.
Oh yeah, with and Rory especially not knowing being in that role for so long. That's a good point. It's a good one overall. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's a good way to start this collection of series as well. Well, so let's do the next one, and that is probably my favorite. One of my favorites, as you could probably tell why.
How come I'm not surprised?
Father of the Daleks, which has the 11th Doctor facing off with Davros. What'd you guys think of this one?
It rocked really hard, mainly because, we've not had the 11th Doctor and Davros together. We kind of managed to skip that in the series, so it was cool to finally get that meeting. And as nutty of an idea as it is, especially considering where we go with the Magician's Apprentice 2-parter, I really like the idea of Davros and the Doctor kind of calling a timeout and just sitting down, that Davros is invited to tea on Planet X on Christmas Day, and he doesn't get it. And the Doctor continues to do it. In fact, I'm a little disappointed by that synopsis to hear that there were only 3. I kind of like the idea that this is just a repeated,
There was even more of them.
Annual thing. And Davros goes, and every time he goes, he thinks to himself, "Why am I doing this? Because I'm not going to learn anything. I'm not going to get better. I'm not going to do this." But he continues to go, in spite of himself. I really liked that dynamic.
And having it be the 11th Doctor is the perfect Doctor to do that sort of situation.
Yeah.
Especially on Christmas.
Yeah, I think so too. In fact, it's kind of echoes, and I don't think any of us were wowed by this, but Nightmare in Silver, was that the one where he's being taken over, or they're trying to cyber convert him, and he's basically playing the chess game in his head with the controller? This is kind of that same, I got that kind of same vibe from the 11th Doctor in this one, that he's playing this game of chess with Davros, but not necessarily in such a way that it's manipulation or it's trying to move pieces around. It's really trying to convince Davros that, his creation are never going to love him like a father. And so there is no return on the reward for having created these Daleks. And if you could simply introduce genetics that would give them sympathy or change their, ultimate destructive ways, things could be better, and perhaps they would appreciate Davros. But he refuses to do so. And in fact, so much so that every time that the Doctor meets with him, it almost makes Davros more steadfast in breeding out the any sort of emotion or any sort of good in these Daleks. And it's almost as though the Doctor drives Davros to, or drives the Daleks to be each time even more ruthless, because every time they're thwarted by the Doctor. And so I think that there's this neat progression of the more the 11th Doctor, or the more the Doctor, pleads with Davros to change the Daleks, the worse things get. And I think it's almost inadvertently happening. And I think I saw somewhere, and I didn't read the whole article, but Screen Rant was kind of going down the same lines. And I think they were implying that this might have been the crux for what starts the Time War. Not, obviously it's been said that Genesis of the Daleks, the events that happened there were kind of the first volley in the war. But I think they were implying that this is almost what drives the ultimate battle, and that the Doctor doesn't necessarily know that these interventions are leading to that event, which I thought was an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's very much, you mentioned chess, and this would not be the 7th Doctor playing chess, attempting to position Davros. It's very much more X-Men. It's Xavier and Magneto meeting for a quote-unquote friendly game.
Yeah.
While they talk about the fact that they are on, polar opposite sides of each other on this issue. And that camaraderie, I almost hesitate to use that word, but it's there. There's a strange respect for each other, that despite the fact that Davros is, of course, insane.
Yeah.
he is quite brilliant for all of his defects, and for as infuriating as the Doctor can be, Davros recognizes that the man is an equal. He would never, ever say superior.
Right,
he would certainly look at him as almost an equal.
Right.
And just the very quiet nature of these little conversations in cafes and tea shops and things, that really spoke. That to me was kind of like, this is the perfect Doctor Who Christmas story.
Yeah.
Almost. That it's not a big war. It's not a let's save the planet. It's not the Time Lords are coming back from a crack. It's just Christmas, and I'm here to soak it up, and that was really cool. Now I think the story suffered just a little bit from editing, because the transitions between those 3 Christmases and the overarching event which of course we have to have a war because it's a Doctor Who story at Christmas time.
Because there's Daleks and there has to be
and there's
war.
Daleks. I mean, Dalek's going to do what Dalek's going to do. The transitions between those back and forth were a little jarring. It felt like as each time as we stepped back into one of them. But
I think that's what I liked about it, because I thought they were threaded in really well, in the sense that, because I think once you by the time you sort of get into the groove of what's happening between the two in these conversations, we slip into events or consequences or results of what has earlier been discussed. So I thought they were kind of weaved together very well. I think the other thing that I really like about this is the Doctor is very effective in driving his point, especially that last point where he makes the deal with the Daleks that, okay, you can kill me, but you got to kill Davros as well. And so I think he's very effective in how he communicates to Davros what the problem is and why, pleads for him, or doesn't plead, but at least employs him to make that change in the Daleks and his children. And Davros still steadfastly refuses to do so. And I think that was what was really cool about it, is there's this dynamic between these two guys that is always going to be them butting heads, but also having this respectful relationship.
What I kind of liked about the linking of them together, it felt a little bit like there was the same conversation every time, but we're picking it up at different points.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if that was purposeful, so that you have that, is this a linear conversation, or is this because, in fact, it's almost like the conversation there's a redundancy to it, because...
Well, it feels like they're having the same argument over and over.
Right, exactly. It's like they nothing is ever resolved, and we have basically the same argument with different context each time.
Which is totally in character for the two of them. They would keep having the same argument until, the Doctor tricks the Daleks into what he did at the end.
That's true.
I also enjoyed the callback to the Fourth Doctor, and not only the virus conversation, which of course is, it's the pinnacle of Doctor Who right there.
Right.
The follow-up episode where it's like, I seem to remember you turning my life support systems off. It's like it's one more illustration as to why it had to be the 11th Doctor. It had to be the childlike, full of hope Doctor.
Yes.
Because the Fourth Doctor would not invite Davros to tea. The 7th Doctor would not invite Davros to tea.
And while the 12th Doctor would go to Davros, he wouldn't invite Davros anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to the next one, Inflicting Christmas, and this one featured the 12th Doctor and Bill. Keith, you want to start this one?
I'm a little blurry on this one. I don't remember.
This is the one where the
I remember liking it.
The genius woman who has the corporation. I think it's I don't remember what her little corporation.
Oh, the Hard Light Memories.
Yeah, and her son is.
Oh yeah.
So
the holodeck.
Basically,
The
yeah.
holodeck
Well,
episode.
it's a mother and son conflict. The mother who's so enwrapped in her business and her her career and her day-to-day life as a businesswoman, and she's effectively ignoring her son, so much so that her son lashes out by taking control of this device that projects memories and images that's she's intended to be used for good, and he has inadvertently warped the perspective of his memories because of the way he's been treated. And I thought it's not a new story by any means. It's very much a trope of its design, but I thought it was well done and crafted in such a way that it gives the companion a chance to be brought to the forefront and be the one to kind of at least, while I don't think either of them could have done it without the Doctor, or even in this case, without, what was the character's name? I can't remember the lady's name. Without her, intervening, but it gives them a chance to have, build on their character and give them a chance to kind of shine for a little while in these stories. Her confronting the child and having these discussions about, this isn't how she is. This is only a perception of how your memories are warping your perspective of your mom. And I think it was really good. It was a really enjoyable story. Not the best one in the book, but I thoroughly enjoyed it.
It felt very much like a 12th Doctor and Bill story, and Bill's voice was just spot on. Made me wish we had more Bill stories than what we got.
I thought the same.
It also it kind of clicks along. It's kind of your standard story. It's there's no big revelations that happen in it. However, the ending isn't a happy ending. It's
right.
And not everything's all sunshine and roses at the end of it. They're still dealing with things, and nothing's really. They've discussed their issues, but they haven't solved their issues, and that's what makes this story good. It's a Doctor Who story that ends with reality, and that's for the most part fairly rare. But it's something that the 12th Doctor's era had a little bit more of than others. So I thought that was what made this story so good.
It does fit in line, and it ends with, it doesn't end with a resolution, but it does end with a hope that they're on the path for that. And
yes,
I think that's done
exactly.
well.
It also, in a way, makes it the perfect 12th Doctor story.
He's all about hope.
Yeah, well, he's all about hope, but he's also being the grumpy realist that he is. A lot of that era's stories were not as fairy tale, they weren't the Stephen Moffat fairy tale types. They were a little more grounded. They were a little more realistic, and they were a little more dark. They were a little more, we fixed it, but we didn't exactly get a happy ending out of it.
Right. Well, 12 was always sort of the cynical Doctor. He was always sort of the one that, while I think he knew that there was hope, he was always also very grounded in reality and making you very aware that, life wasn't a fairy tale, that bad things did happen occasionally. All right, well, let's move on to the next one, which is For the Girl Who Has Everything. And this featured Osgood. And then, of course, Kate Stewart later. But
and this might be my favorite one in the book.
I like this one a lot, too. Well, Sean, you start off since this is one of your favorites.
With the opening of, getting a little bit more of Unit and hey, it's Osgood, and kind of trying to figure out exactly where in her timeline it's placed, only to go, it's, she's a week into the job or whatever, a month in. She's very, very fresh and new. I was very excited about the spatial engineering of the Grey Archive. That was such a nifty thing, and I was a little surprised that we didn't get a name drop with the Doctor helping out with that. Not that he necessarily would have given them that, but
Well,
I guess
I think that's why it doesn't work so well.
Yeah,
that's why it becomes an issue, is because the Doctor didn't help them.
Yeah,
and it is
they tried
Unit.
to do it on their own.
It is Unit. They're going to take these things that they have confiscated. It's not so much like Torchwood, but it's Unit's going to take these things that they've confiscated that's alien tech, and they're going to try to utilize it or weaponize it or use it as security. And I agree. I just think it's not going to work exactly right, because if they had gone to the Doctor and he'd had a hand in it, then it would work right, but it doesn't. They don't quite have it. I like that.
And then the idea that something has gotten loose. Okay, yeah, you have my attention. This is great. I'm so excited. And the way that Osgood handles herself, because this isn't self-assured facing down a Zygon Osgood. This is very green, fresh to the idea of this Osgood. I liked the little insights into her family and her dad and how she thought he might handle things of this nature. And there was just so much greatness there. And a nice callback to Sontarn's stratagem, with the cloning pod being responsible for this. And ultimately the villain of that episode being kind of pressed back into service in a way.
Yeah.
Was very cool. But nothing got a bigger squee out of me than rummaging through a box and finding this scarf.
Yeah.
And thinking nothing of it. And she wraps it around herself. And then, to stem the bleeding from this wound. And then instead of cutting it off like a Band-Aid, puts the rest of it around her neck. And it suddenly becomes who Osgood is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was just, yes. I don't know why. That got the biggest fan moment of excitement out of me.
Well, it makes the scarf that she wears in the future a little less fan service and gives it more meaning to it.
Yeah.
Yes. It's now part of the uniform,
Yeah.
Even though it changes later to the bow tie, but it or the question marks. Osgood's changed her look several times since then, but the scarf now has it's not just aren't you clever? No, it serves a purpose for being there.
I think also what I liked about it is it's early Osgood. It's Osgood as she's just joined UNIT or is in very early days of UNIT. I think I like that it's a story that introduces us to why she becomes basically a second to Kate Stewart. I think it's a admirable way for her to be rewarded and promoted to that position. I also like the fact that this story cements the idea that her father isn't Tom Osgood, who we've always presumed, and I think Stephen Moffat even has previously hinted towards that, but that her father, even though they're an old UNIT family, that her father's Frank Osgood, which we can only presume is maybe a brother or relation to Tom Osgood. So I thought that was interesting that they didn't make that David Rudden didn't make that direct connection with Tom Osgood from the UNIT days in the Pertwee era, but that her father was sort of this, not really a military type guy. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It didn't take much to stretch my headcanon into Uncle Osgood.
Yeah, so I kind of thought the same thing too. I also like that she has
the way it was phrased also made it sound like it was more than him that was part of the UNIT family.
Yes, no, I agree. I also like that I didn't know this, that she's got a sister who's kind of one of those useless people that latch on to everything that their siblings do in order to take credit for something. That was neat.
I love the exploring of other parts of UNIT that we hadn't seen before. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and mention of different archives, blue and red archive.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next story, which is Visiting Hours. Yes, Visiting Hours, and this is River and Rory. I want to point out before we get too far, because I think this is another one of the stories. There is a ongoing thread in this, and each story, and I believe it was the first story with Rose and Tan, there's always an after, and the after is always these two characters that are thread through this. And this happens to be, I think, a second one that we don't get the siblings, but we do, because the psychiatrist guy is going to give them information about River Song. So I suppose that is in this one as well. But I wanted to point out that there is a ongoing thread throughout these stories as we go. And this happens to be one of them that ties directly to that thread. What'd you guys think of this one? Keith, you should start on this one. This is your era.
This is one I just had a lot of fun reading. The idea of Rory taking Christmas dinner to River and not being on appearances, not being very happy about it.
Yeah.
And then seeing their dynamics. You never really got a lot of River and Rory together alone. So seeing them try to kind of work through it, and then playing the psychiatrist, making him think that, they were having this big conflict in order to trick him because he was behind it all, I thought was very well done, and I didn't fully see coming. I was actually kind of caught by surprise by that. So
I agree.
Overall, I have high marks for this one.
I agree. I think that's what I like the best about it, is that it really bamboozled me, and I thought it was a story in conflict between father and daughter, and how Rory regrets the fact that she's not around. He regrets the fact, and I think that he
hates the fact that she's in prison.
Yeah, and I think that he sort of still. I think that's echoes of truth, but to realize that they are both still on the same page and they're working in tandem in order to thwart this psychiatrist, I think works really well. And so I liked that they sent me down that path of, oh wow, they're really having family issues here, only to turn it and say, oh, did you really think that we were going to give you this information? And I thought that was good, because I was caught off guard by it as well.
And the exploration of, there is family issues there still, even though it didn't let them lose the day. They still had the issues that they're still trying to work through a little bit, because, while Rory doesn't think she should be there, she still has to be, and him having guilt of not being there for her growing up and all that stuff. It is very well thought through and kind of hashed out a little bit. But another story where they don't truly give everything's roses at the end of it. Yeah, they defeat the psychiatrist, but some of these issues between River and Rory still linger.
Right. But it's glaringly obvious too that because Amy can't be there, there is an element missing too.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
No, it also, as if Rory wasn't cool enough, it kind of creates this additional edge to Rory that he doesn't get to show frequently enough. Rory the nurse, Rory the caregiver, Rory the glue that's trying to hold people together, Rory the slightly always behind the circumstances as they unfold. And a lot of that has to do just simply because, well, Amy's there. And Amy is such a she was born to be a companion, and we won't say anything about her being warped from an early age by it, but she was very much born and bred and prepped for a role running throughout the universe. And Rory kind of does his best to catch up, and occasionally it's nice to be reminded that, well, yes, that's true. And a lot of that is because Rory, in a submissive default to Amy position, that's just kind of, that's the way his switch is flipped. But we sometimes can forget that Rory destroyed the cyber fleet and delivered the message of, would you like me to repeat the question? Mm-hmm. We sometimes forget that Rory was a Roman centurion, the lone centurion for 2,000 years, and that he is quite adept with a broadsword, because he'd have to be. And so to get those kinds of moments where, as they're going, one almost would have expected River to take front and center on this story once she was introduced. But it's not. It's still from Rory's point of view. It's still Rory's story. And as they're bickering with each other and fighting things, and then he charges into the room where the bad guy is at the end. There was just a lot of great moments there for this character, which kind of made me realize, man, do I miss Rory?
Yeah.
Right.
It does a lot for the growth of his character, because it shows those two sides that you illustrated very nicely, and they're in tandem, side by side, through this whole story.
The man who punched out Hitler and put him in a cupboard.
Yeah. All right, and let's move on. And as we said, the after on this one is, the intention was to give these kids information on River, although I don't think that they got it. The next one is We Will Feed You to the Trees, which features the Seventh Doctor, which this is our first classic series Doctor, and I think the only one.
TARDIS Wiki says, no, there's definitely one more after this one.
Is there? Okay, I couldn't remember for sure.
TARDIS Wiki says there's two more.
Oh, okay. Well, this is the one where the Doctor, we start out with the Doctor being a prisoner of this girl who we don't know who she is yet, and he's being led away from town through the crowd of prying eyes into the edge of the city and then out into a forest area. And the doctor is questioning her to find out what exactly is going on. What'd you guys think of this story?
My initial thought was worry. I was very concerned that this, in some weird way, was going to be reminiscent of Forest of the Night. Was that the name of that one?
What you'll have
The
to
12th Doctor one?
where the planet with the solar flares and yeah.
The really cool idea that just did not work at all. And I don't know why. Just the fact that there's trees in it shouldn't be enough to make me make that connection. But I was suddenly like, oh, God, it's the trees.
See, I was worried they were going to go more the Doctor, the Widow, the Wardrobe.
That was my second thought. And it was like, neither one of those needed a return. I mean, I guess maybe you could write something that would fix it, and that would be kind of cool. But, I don't need to go back there. And instead, we kind of got it was almost more Girl in the Fireplace with the ultimate resolution of what was going on and what happened and how the doctor, fixed it, which was very cool. I liked that idea. Apparently I liked that idea a lot since they've done it a couple of times, and I always seem to enjoy those. But the idea that this terraforming machine has kind of gotten a little wonky, and the settlers have regressed in a way to a point where we're into the superstitious element of it, and it's become a religion, and we're going to sacrifice somebody to the machine as opposed, for service. It was a very cool idea. And I kind of liked the fact that it was there was a lot of build up for what ultimately was a red herring.
Yeah. I think that, and I like the mystery of it surrounding it, and you're led to believe that there's something in the forest, that they're actually feeding these people to the forest, to nature, and it's not revealed that it's a machine until much later. And I thought that was pretty cool. I also like it's mostly an Everybody Lives story as well, because when we find out what has happened to all these people that have been quote unquote fed to the forest, when we find out that they're basically performing a service, maybe not consciously doing so, but they're performing a service because the machinery and the forest, the terraforming requires it. I thought that was a neat resolution to it as well.
Well, and it's not even just Everybody Lives, but none of them have aged.
Yeah,
all the ones that they got sent away are still the same age they were when they got sent away. They've been preserved. So,
right.
I mean, there's some bittersweetness to that, but it's kind of also a neat added element to not just everyone's alive. Everyone's been preserved and okay. They're not going to come back ancient and decrepit or anything like that.
Although it did bring up to mind okay, so I know we're not going to get this, but what happens tomorrow?
Yeah.
What happens when you go back
obviously,
into the village with all these people who were given up and fed to the forest, and they are now coming back and they still have their youth, and they're like, you fed me to the trees.
Maybe I misread this, but it also made it sound like that it still had to be a yearly thing, and they wouldn't all be able to go back at once, that it was going to be a slow progression of people going back. Did I maybe read something more into that?
I just read it as it needed one. So
just one
took
person
the doctor
stayed.
back is the one who stayed.
I got you.
And only for a year.
Right.
I like that she's able to be reunited with her wife too. I thought that was neat.
Yeah. I thought it was a good Seventh Doctor story.
I think it's tailored to the Seventh Doctor, because I think the Seventh Doctor is always one of those incarnations that I've always felt is thinking about 7 moves ahead. And it's tailored well to him because it's almost like he's got it worked out before, he doesn't quite let you know that he's got it worked out, but he's just on the verge of having worked out the dilemma or the puzzle or what's going on here right before he's put in peril. And I think that frequently happens to the Seventh Doctor, and I think that it works really well for his Doctor because he's just almost there. He's almost sussed out exactly what is happening in this situation before something happens and confirms his suspicions, which I think really works really well as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Christmas with the Plasavores. And this one does not, it does feature a doctor, I suppose. Oh, I did not, so I did not think, now that I'm looking at the wiki, I did not think this was the fourth Doctor that shows up. Why did I not get that?
I didn't pick up on that either until I looked at the wiki. I just got, it's a doctor.
Yeah.
It was very generic in my opinion.
There wasn't enough of him other than he was young, bursting in the door.
Yeah.
And then stopped. Did I miss something? Well, that's not descriptive enough. It could have been any of them.
Well, I think maybe had I known Fourth Doctor, that it was a Fourth Doctor, I might have not, obviously the words wouldn't have changed, but I might have read it differently in my mind in his voice, and maybe it would have been different. So I kind of wish I'd have known that. But this is about Catherine Sullivan and her father, who have recently lost their mother, are on hard times, and money is very tight. And Amelia Plasavore and her presumed mother and father show up at the door one winter night, and
Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Christmas Eve, and are invited in out of the cold, and we proceed to find out that this Amelia Plasavore is actually an alien that drinks blood, and she's going to take over basically Catherine's family life. I think it was funny that she's this little prissy little prima donna, and that she's ended up landing at this house, or she, life is or such as it is, she's ended up at this place where she's very disappointed that Catherine, doesn't have, fun, girly little things, that she's, obsessed with books on war and superstition and things like that. So I think it's kind of funny that it progresses in such a way that it's almost like it's not quite working out how Catherine implied, but she's going to make the best of it anyway. Or not Catherine, Amelia implied, preferred, but she's going to make the best of it anyway.
Well, it kind of fits in line with the characterization of the Plasmavore in Smith and Jones.
Yeah.
It was kind of a very deceiving appearance that they had on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And amazingly does a very nice job of furthering that story. Taking a villain that was kind of a one-off, that we didn't necessarily need a return of the Plasmavore, and yet doing something with them that, while still in keeping with the character, the nature of the beast, as it were, still managed to kind of do a little world building for them. And it's still a lone Plasmavore. It's still got a slab. It's still, there are many, many, many similarities to it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that anybody looking back at Smith and Jones thinks, oh yeah, the blood vampire, that's the way to, no, everybody looks at the Jadoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just taking that little nugget and kind of running with it, while still in many, many, many ways, it's exactly the same. It's a lone Plasmavore coming to do the thing, thwarted by Salt and the Doctor. Okay. But yet it was such a fun story. I think maybe because it was done through the eyes of the child.
Yeah.
Instead of Martha, it flipped that script just enough that it felt fresh.
It also flips.
Well, it was fun, but it was also heartbreaking at the same time.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was. There's a lot of emotion put into this one, which I think is done well. It also flips the script on the ending of the Doctor coming in at the nick of time and saving the day, because he doesn't. He comes in after the day's been saved by the fact that this little girl has been cutting, corners, and her. by collecting salt and sugar packets because she knows that her family is that her and her dad are struggling financially, and her dad being proud enough to say, that's not something that we do, that but her having done it anyway, and him knowing and convincing the little girl to go, tricking her into pulling that down onto her. I thought that was a really cool way to end the story and have the doctor come in too late at the last minute. So I thought that was neat.
Yeah.
But now I'm sad that it was the fourth doctor that didn't get to save the day.
I suppose there was something in his wide, wild eyes and frantically orbiting hands. I suppose that's...
I guess that could be... If they had something about teeth and curls, it would have been...
Yeah, that would have been... But maybe that would have been too obvious, I guess.
The scarf entered the room before he did. Just something I needed to nail it down.
Because the wild hands makes me also think 11th Doctor.
Well, that's what I was about to say, yeah. And second Doctor had wild hands as well.
Well, yeah, and even his one, or he's got two lines. Salt, he added dramatically, can overload a plasmavor's circulatory system. He paused, taking in the scene. The slabs are down. Catherine could swear there was disappointment in his voice. Did I do that? I don't think I did that.
Okay, that sounds like a fourth Doctor.
Knowing it's the fourth Doctor, I can now hear the fourth Doctor. But as Keith said, any Doctor, did I do that? I don't think I did that.
I think I had 11 in mind.
I could hear 11 with that.
Yeah, I think I had 11 in mind.
And maybe it's just because, most of these have been newer series Doctors.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to A Girl Called Doubt, because this is the other one that I knew for certain was a classic Doctor. This one features the fifth Doctor and Cybermen as the enemy, and a group of people that are fighting against the invasion of them. Keith, you get to start with this one.
I absolutely. This is probably my favorite one out of the whole book, obviously.
I'll go figure.
Getting to explore the cyber wars. I mean, how cool is this? And the devastation left behind of, they come in, they convert, they leave. They take those that are good enough to fight with them and leave the rest behind. How cool. This needed to be more than just a short story. There's so much material to mine here to do a story. And then you have the aspect of them unconverting a Cyberman to lead them to where they need to go. Just this resistance band doing that, and her not realizing what she is. It's that part's a little bit, Bill and the end of her run, but it's still done in such a well way that you don't realize it until we get to that point where she realizes it. And it's just so masterfully told and so well crafted and handled that it's they lay the hints of why she's not why she has to stay away from the windows and why she gets certain looks a certain way. It's not just because she's a new recruit, it's because she's a Cyberman, but you don't realize that until the revelation. It's just this is the piece de resistance for this anthology.
Sadly, I saw that coming though, and I think I thought
same.
Personally, I thought the hints were a little too heavy-handed, and I think if they'd have been more subtle, I wouldn't have seen it. But I had in mind Bill in her last story, and I also had in mind Clara in the Dalek, Osgood. Claire, not Osgood, Oswald. I had Osgood. I had her in mind as well, of the Dalek, not realizing that it was a Dalek. So I had that going into it. And while I think that it's developed as a very good story. I thoroughly enjoyed it for everything that you've said about it, Keith. I think it's well written. I like them exploring the idea of the cyber war. It's heart-wrenching in a way that they've been fighting this hard and this long, only to find out that the cyber leaders have just gone, they come to a point where they feel like they might be getting the upper hand, and it's like, nope, they've gutted the society and left. And it's almost more heart-wrenching than them facing down Cybermen to show up and find ones that are, basically hollow shells because the cyber leaders have already left and moved on to their next conquest. So yeah, it's a good story. I really liked it. I just wish it hadn't been so heavy with the foreshadowing, and I think maybe I wouldn't have got it as soon as I did.
I guess I was reveling in the atmosphere and like the idea that they've laid down of this world and what's been happening that I didn't pay that close of attention to the foreshadowing.
And he paints a really good picture of the devastation in this story.
I'm not even sure if it was the foreshadowing or the hints. I don't know that they were heavy-handed per se up until, and I don't know, Glenn, maybe you can chime in on this as well, but for me, it was where they found the Cybermen at the post office. And the passage is, doubt doesn't even think. She drops her shoulder and charges. The stealer has just enough time to turn before she puts it through the stone wall.
Yeah.
That to me was the, all of a sudden, this very carefully constructed story broke because my brain stopped and went, there's no way that you could hit a Cyberman hard enough to put it through a wall unless you yourself were some sort of conversion, augmented human or something. And once I thought that, then I couldn't not see all of the hints that were being dropped.
Yeah, I think that's the one that cemented it for me. I think early on when they're referring to scientists questioning whether they could deconvert them, planted the seed in my head. And there was another one where she has almost a memory glitch, and I can't remember exactly where it was, that I also thought, okay, she's missing memories. I'm wondering if this is the case. So those two happened early on enough that it made me start thinking about them, and then it was that moment you just described, Sean, that I went, okay, that's definitely what it is.
Yeah. And then once I knew, then every hint that came afterwards was kind of just a reinforcement of, don't. I don't want to know the surprise.
And
I'd rather be surprised.
One of the ones that I didn't catch on to until after that moment you described was the one guy that just had almost a disdain for her. That was happening before, but I didn't see it at first. And when that happened, I thought back at that, and I thought, that was a sign. Even before we got to the end and the revelation, I thought, I bet that was a sign as well that he doesn't trust her. He doesn't, because she is the enemy, or was once the enemy. Again, I don't want to undersell the story for just because I figured it out early on. Did not undersell how well this story is put together and how emotional this story is, because it is still even gut wrenching at the end when it's revealed to her who she is.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really enjoyed this one and the telling of it. And as Keith said, he paints a very, very vivid picture of this devastated world. And it feels so very spare parts apocalyptic. Yeah. That we're at the end of this society, and that it really doesn't matter if they manage to reclaim the planet or not. They're not going to make it.
Yeah, it's a little bit Walking Dead, but with Cybermen.
And the most chilling line is the sergeant when he says, "You think she's the first doubt I've had to put down."
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, what a double-edged line that is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you also get the impression, that's when her name no longer has a meaning for it being her name. They call them all doubts, and I think that was one of the things that got me a little choked up about it. Was, oh gosh, this isn't. They've stripped every bit of her identity by doing that and implying that they're all called doubt.
Yeah, very much a Walking Dead. Actually, that's a very good analogy for it, because the fact that they call them stealers, which is not a term that I don't think we've had for Cybermen before, but it totally fits. Well, yeah, okay, and. So yeah, there was a lot of that world building going on there, and I agree with Keith that more exploration into the cyber wars would not go amiss.
Was there not a reference to them as Steelers in Nightmare in Silver?
I don't remember
so.
That.
Okay, I'm planting that in my head from that being used in this one. Maybe.
I think we've had tinnies. I think we've had.
Tinnies maybe is what I'm thinking of. Well, let's move on to A Perfect Christmas, which features Vastra, Jenny, and Strax, the Paternoster gang. And this is the one with the girl that they bring the coat to Vastra because they've got a pickpocket on the loose, and I think isn't it the inspector brings her the jacket to kind of figure out the mystery or something to that effect, and the girl shows up to reclaim the jacket, and I love that Vastra's using the coat in a Sherlock-esque way to deduce the identity or the character of its wearer, and Strax pipes in with this somewhat accurate and absurd portrayal of who might own the coat. And then she says, Vastra's almost set back by that as, how do you know? How did you get that? You know, she's almost impressed with Strax, and it's because she showed up to return it, and he conked her over the head with a frying pan in the kitchen. I love that. That was so Strax.
If anything, this story just confirmed that even all these years later, I'm still ready for a Paternoster Gang show.
Well, yeah, they're doing audios on Big Finish.
All the more reason to get the Big Finish stuff on the schedule.
It's not the same. I would settle for a Paternoster Gang show in just about any format, whether it was a legit Doctor Who spinoff or if it was treated as a British sitcom, complete with laugh track every time Strax walked into a room. I'm ready for more of this. These are such enjoyable characters. And this was a fun story.
It was a fun idea story.
That I particularly appreciated the idea that they kind of humanized Vastra in a way by talking about Last Christmas and this revived Silurian princess.
I'm intrigued by that story.
Ditto.
Made me wonder if it was a reference to the Big Finish audios.
Could have been.
The fact that Vastra kind of sort of considered, perhaps, for a moment, and that put a strain on the relationship that she's been trying, overcompensating for a year to try and make up for it. That, to me, was a really intriguing nugget. I appreciated the fact that the Papal mainframe returned.
Yeah. Well, I like how it explored not just that, but it really shows her commitment to Jenny to try to give her, things that are important, that she feels is important to her, certain traditions, certain things, because in years past it hasn't been the focus of their relationship. And so trying to give her that by, especially, she almost doesn't want to take the case when it comes in, and Jenny has to persuade her to do that. And, even when she's going to take the, after they discover what is in the key within the jewel that is in the was it a brooch or a pendant, and Vastra's going to take it and get as far away from Jenny and Strax and Earth, for that matter, in order to protect him. It's just it's one thing after another. In that conversation where Jenny shows up after Vastra thinks she's away or going to be away, and we do these things before we talk, and there's a thread of the relationship building between Jenny and Vastra here, and it's almost like the rest of the story is sort of taking an aside to what's important here, and I like that it's structured in such a way that there's two stories, or not two stories, but two themes happening within this story. I like the idea that they suss out that it's a trap, that it's a trap to bring the was it the TARDIS? I don't remember. It was a trap to bring the TARDIS there so that they could steal. No, it was a trap to bring the Doctor there, they presume, in order to kill the Doctor or capture the Doctor or whatever. I think it's later we discover that it was a trap to get the TARDIS ultimately, but because this one has an after as well.
Another after.
Yeah, and we find out who Madge actually was.
Yeah, this one kind of ties into that. The big story kind of ties into the overarching story
Yeah, it certainly does.
more so than others.
Well, and I think that's just it. I think we early on we get little nuggets and little keys of the two siblings, and then this is the one that sort of gives us that nudge into, okay, these two are important and something is happening here behind the scenes. It was a great story. I really loved it.
It really was.
Very fun.
When you get 9 stories into a book of an anthology book, nonetheless, and you're still enjoying every bit of what you've been reading, that's high marks. I'll tell you that right now.
That's true.
Let's move on to the next one, which is Missing Habitats Frond. No, Missing Habitus Frond. Excuse me.
Habitus Frond.
Yeah, Habitus Frond. Keith, I'm going to let you start off on this one. Yeah, I was going to let you start off with this one because I have a few issues myself.
I had issues with the story up until the very end. Because as we were going, I was like, why is Missy doing all of this? What? And then it's, she's just bored and is actually wreaking havoc and not actually being helpful after all. Okay, I can buy it.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that, and I think that's a sufficient explanation, but I think my problem that I have with it is I didn't suspect that she was doing good. I didn't expect this to be...
and that's the thing.
I didn't expect this to be, it's Christmas time, so she's feeling a little, giving, in the giving mood to help somebody else. But I also thought that there should have been more because the Master and / Missy have always, there's always an ultimate goal for whatever they do. And while I think it is in character for Missy specifically to say, I did it because I was bored, it makes sense for the character, so I'm okay with it. But I really wanted a more lofty goal or a lofty reason for why she was doing it rather than just telling me it was just because I wanted to cause some mischief. That was my only problem with it.
Had what she'd been trying to steal been of a higher importance other than, the Scottish jewels, I mean, it would have been added a little weight to why she was doing what she was doing.
Right, exactly. And I liked the ride. I liked the way that she was manipulating the situation without it being overtly obvious that she was doing it. I suspected she was the reason for the body on the train platform. I suspected she was the one that pushed the guy off.
Her glove.
I don't know that I even suspected it was her glove, although in hindsight I kind of went, okay, obviously. But the deaths I knew because she was always in that situation. She was walking away from the body in the one. She was already on the roof in the next one. So I sort of suspected that she was having a hand in all of this, but so I wasn't surprised by that. But I still, every turn that they took, I thought, where are we going to go with this? And then to imply that it was the Inspector General guy or the main, the main detective, the boss. I thought, okay, so this is like an inside job, and because she's manipulating him to believe that maybe the things that he's always done wrong, that he's bumbled in his life, weren't necessarily his fault, were a setup. And it's very early on implied that no, he really was responsible for these. But as this progresses, you as the reader are almost convinced that, especially when we get to the fact that his boss might have been the one that was involved in this, you wonder, wait a minute, maybe he has been a patsy for a lot of things in the past. And then they turn that again on its ear. So that was well done.
Yeah. Well, and, from the get-go, I kind of suspected that Missy was a part of the jewel heist in the beginning, so that was always in the back of my head throughout the entire story too, so it's not like I could really buy in on a lot of what they were trying to sell me.
Yeah. I think the one missing piece I had, though, was whatever happened to the guy's bag and hat they left on the train.
It's still there.
I had hoped that maybe they were
lost and found.
I had hoped that something would have turned up later and connected to that, because I kept thinking, and it's probably because I hate to leave things behind, but I kept thinking, I hope this guy gets his hat and his bag back. Not enough to take me out of the story, but I kept thinking, that's going to connect somewhere, isn't it? I mean, certainly that's going to be... he's either going to be framed with it or something, but no, I never even addressed it again, so...
Do you know what's inside the bag?
What's inside the bag?
The duck pond.
That's where they left it. Should we move on?
John, did you have anything about this one?
Other than this is where I stopped reading because I ran out of time. No, I don't have an opinion. I am unfortunately without opinion on the final 3 stories because I didn't get my homework done. So I don't have anything to add, and I will listen to you guys wax philosophic on these with much anticipation of finally being able to read these 3.
And the next one is A Day to Yourselves, which is a Ninth Doctor story.
I enjoyed this one quite a bit too.
Did you?
I did. I like the idea of, the Ninth Doctor trying to go do something and keeping getting thwarted by his future self. I just found it immensely entertaining.
I think the concept of it is good. The idea was good. To me, it missed the mark on the portrayal of the Ninth Doctor. And I think part of the problem that I have is it's hard to place when this happened. You presume that this is after his regeneration, before he meets Rose, right?
Yeah, you kind of have to.
So if you put it in that context or time frame, the things that he's doing, it's almost like he's maybe it does make more sense when I think about it. It's almost like he's looking for things to do. He's looking for a purpose. And so I think that in turn kind of works against the story of his other incarnations trying to give him some time off, because he's just come off of what he presumes is him ending the time war in such a way that he did. And so if I had come off of that, I might be trying to busy myself with, saving civilizations or trying to help other planets or trying to help other people and races and beings and things like that. But everywhere he goes, he's thwarted because his other incarnations have stepped in and taken care of it before he can do anything. And it's a nice sentiment that they're trying to give him basically, quote unquote, a day off, but it doesn't quite work because it's at a point where he's almost it pushes it to the point where he almost sabotages a situation in order to find out what's going on. And to me, that wasn't very much in the character of the Ninth Doctor. So I struggled a little bit with that.
I could see that. But I think they're also trying to pass along a message to him that he needed at the same time.
Well, I think so too, especially if this is right on the heels of the Time War. So
yeah, so it's kind of one of those, it kind of toes the line, but it has an important aspect to it that's needed also.
Yeah. It's a short
decision
one
in the ranks.
Yeah, it's a short one. There's not a lot going on in this story.
There's not a lot of substance to it.
But it's almost an appropriate spot for this because of where we go to in the next story. So it's almost okay, let's put the brakes on before we get into something that's a little more high-minded in the next story, which is the Paradox Moon. And this one features the 13th Doctor and the Shadow Architect from the Shadow Proclamation, and then also the siblings, Sibling Different and Sibling Sane, same. We're finally getting to a point in this where this
is the culmination of it.
Yeah, these characters that have been sort of a thread occasionally throughout this anthology this is finally their story. I like the idea of these paradoxal twins who are effectively out of time because of all of these dead-end timelines that have either been corrected by the doctor's involvement in the past. We also get the impression that they are victims of the Time War, that they are somehow energy or paradoxes existing outside of that time bubble that was put on and locked the Time war away, and that's part of the reason why they're kind of out of phase sync with society, or with reality, I guess I should say. And I like the idea that they're scavenging TARDISes or parts of the TARDIS from these broken timelines in order to create their own TARDIS and use that to. What were they trying to do? They were trying to get. They weren't trying.
That's the part of this story that I'm not clear on, and that's where it kind of suffers for me.
They weren't necessarily trying to go fix anything, but I think they were trying to get back to where they were trying to get back to their normal, I think, is what they were looking for. But I think it is ultimately conveyed to them by the Doctor that, that isn't, in fact, something that can happen. And she tells them that in such a way, and also that what they're doing by Frankensteining the TARDIS together is they're making things worse, and they're basically going to break the universe.
Yeah. It's a lot of high-minded ideas.
It was a lot of high-minded
ideas. I don't know
ideas.
if they really make as much sense when you stop to think about them.
I think it lands well enough for a interesting story to think about what's going on here. I think the other piece we're missing is that I don't think it's heavy-handed, but I think there's like maybe a cameo link to Fraction Paradox, which was a storyline that started in the Eighth Doctor novels, and then spun off into its own thing when Obverse, I think it's Obverse Publishing or Obverse Books, took that story. They took the story over to there, and they kind of changed things a little bit in order to get around copyright. But it splintered off from the BBC books. And I did see where this is the first time that the Fraction Paradox has been at least mentioned since those events in Doctor Who, the Eighth Doctor novels. So that was kind of interesting. But I wonder if we would get something a little more out of it had we had more of that background. I don't know.
Maybe. Another part of it that didn't quite sit as well is she seems to flip fairly easy.
Who? The girl?
Yeah, the girl. To, change her mind about what they're trying to do. She seems to... I know there's not much you can do because it's a short story, so you kind of have to resolve it and move forward. But
agreed. But I kind of felt like I was sold by it better because it's the brother who's been very doubtful this whole time. That I think he flips first, but I think she realizes his sacrifice for her is what turns her around to realize that what they were doing was wrong. And so I think I was okay with it because after he makes the ultimate sacrifice for her in order to fix, he gives her energy and his energy and substance to her, and then ends up also then being able to repair the damage that they've done by doing that as well. I think that worked for me, that she turns so quickly. Now, she was very steadfast and ruthless in her pursuit for whatever their ultimate was. So I can see where there might be a struggle, but I also see that I think I'm okay with the change because she recognizes the sacrifice that her sibling gave.
It's just one of those things where if it was a longer story, they would have been able to flesh that out a little better. Yeah,
that's true. I think again, it's well done. It's an enjoyable story. I liked it. I'm with you. I think there might have been some maybe too high-minded ideas that I didn't quite get. I think this one would be this whole book would be a wonderful reread someday. But I think I might get more out of this one going back, especially now. I think having read the Canaries tie-in, which let's step onto that one too. And Sean, you got this one read, right?
Yes, sir, I did.
So Canaries was the bonus story that they actually released on the release day of the Winter Paradox, and this was their contribution to Time Lord Victorious. And I actually really, really liked this little short story. There's not a lot that happens here. I mean, I think it's only about it was obviously released on the website, but I think if you printed it out, it's only about 8 or 9 pages. But this little curious museum in Switzerland, and the curator of this museum having these impossible things from fractioned timelines, and she's worked it out that these are things that shouldn't exist in our reality, and she's worked it out that they're, for the most part, she's worked it out that they're from somewhere else. They're from times that never materialized. And I think what I really liked about it was, I don't know if this was implied. There are, the Toclafane circuit board is one of them. I haven't seen this anywhere, and maybe it is on the wiki. But the coin that has the Nazi emblems on it, but is from 1953, I believe it was a reference to, at least, one of the first 4 Time Worm New Doctor adventures that I read, where Ace and the Seventh Doctor end up in an alternate timeline where the Nazis had won and had taken over England. And so I think that maybe that was supposed to be a hint to there, but I haven't seen anywhere. I think it had Hitler on one side of the coin as well. So
that's cool.
But just the neat little things that stuck out there. There must have been. Oh, the mention about British royalty being connected, or being having werewolves in the bloodline, which was a nod to Tooth and Claw. Just all these little neat things that were peppered into this shop was pretty cool. I had some different.
The fact that the masks wind up there too.
Yeah. And the masks obviously are sibling same and sibling different, and that was another thing that it sort of ended in such a way that I wasn't sure where this is placed. I read it after I read everything, and so to me it was almost a prequel to what they were doing in over the course of this book. That this was kind of the beginning of their timeline. Did I misrepresent that, or?
See, I got the impression that it was after that. It was the Doctor gifting these masks of these 2 people who've chased paradoxes.
So why is it at the end that when there is the quote unquote time fracture, why at the end are the masks animated with almost a ghost-like energy? That's what I didn't get. That's what I thought was maybe their first. Or maybe that's why it's a paradox, is maybe this is him gifting those masks after that event. Because we know by I think it's the last call, because the Doctor's obviously making phone calls throughout time, pleading with her, saying, let me have these, these are from times that are not supposed, these are objects that aren't supposed to exist. And she thinks she's protecting them, which I think rightfully she was, in a way, but the last call is from the curator, and I think that it's implied that he's the one that gives her the masks, right? And this is where they're getting the 3rd classic Doctor, aren't they? But it's not, because the curator's not technically a classic Doctor.
The 3rd was
the 4th Doctor in that one story. The 4th Doctor. Yeah, that's right. Because we had the 7th Doctor, the 5th Doctor.
We had 7, 4, and 5.
Right. Okay, I forgot about 4. But anyway, I'm kind of monopolizing the discussion here. What do you guys think of this?
I read this one first before I delved into that. So I also very much took it as it felt like a prequel setup story for these things that then did keep showing up throughout the book. But having not finished the other short stories, I don't know if the resolution of where they wind up is what would have put them into the museum.
I don't think they made it clear enough to know one way or another. But they have the masks in the final story, don't they?
They do. In fact, this is the first time that they take them off, is in that last story. It's implied that they're wearing the masks in all of the little cameo appearances they have, with the exception of Madge, you don't get the impression that she's wearing a mask. You get the impression that she's a little girl.
Right.
Or a 15-year-old girl, I should say, not a little girl.
Yeah.
Right, because
I
he
guess that's-
tosses her the mask at the end of that story.
Right.
Put it back on. Yeah. I guess that's why I assume it was afterwards, and that it's leftover paradoxical energy on the mask from their existence.
Oh, I see. And maybe the time fracture
Is causing that.
charges that energy. Okay. that
Charging
makes
everything up. Because all of these things are leftover paradoxes.
I see.
That's an interesting take on it.
So another thing that I've seen too is that this presumably, or could be, the event that kicks off Time Fracture, which is the big event next year. And I didn't know this until I think a few weeks back, and I think I shared this with you guys, but there are some unit videos specifically produced, and I think they're online out there. We probably ought to explore these a bit, but they're basically, because Time Fracture was supposed to have happened during this event, and the whole Time Lord Victorious event, but COVID pushed it off February. But I guess these unit videos exist out there that were kind of like piecemeal set up to the Time Fracture event that the immersive event that you go to. And so some people are speculating that perhaps this is the first instance, or the causal effect of the Time Fracture that will set up that immersive event later on next year. So I guess we'll have to keep an eye out for that.
That would be cool.
That's an interesting idea as well.
Anything on this story that you guys want to add to?
I was particularly impressed with the idea that because it is the paradoxical nature of it, that it fits right in with Time Lord Victorious and kind of makes all of these other stories work, whether they are considered quote unquote real canon or not. That it suddenly becomes just, it's a nice back door into, everything is askew now because of what the Time Lord Victorious is doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In fact, very much
You
so.
can take it pretty far.
Just very much so in the fact that there are these, broken timelines that have changed, and I almost wonder if that fracture comes from whatever 10 is changing in the past in the dark times, if this is a cause and effect of that as well. So that could be the overall greater tie of everything.
That's kind of what I figured.
Yeah, pretty cool. It's neat too.
Perhaps Time Lord Victorious will go so far to, make the different Eighth Doctor lines all be canon because they're just ended timelines.
Yeah, or the Seventh
Virgin
Doctor.
New Adventures, or the Eighth Doctor.
The Seventh Doctor
Adventures.
stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All these things that contradict each other are just separate
It's-
timelines that never came to fruition.
So Time Lord Victorious could possibly be their version of Crisis on Infinite Earth. So.
Exactly.
I was just overall quite impressed with this this selection.
I was too. It's so well written.
So well done.
Yeah.
Good stories.
And this is actually the second set of at least that I'm familiar with, of anthological stories grouped together. Rudden also wrote 12 Weeping Angels, which is an anthology set. I think it was a couple of Christmases ago. Maybe it was last year, 2018. It was released in 2018. And I highly recommend people pick that up as well and read that, because it's got a lot of great stories in it as well. All right, well, Sean, what do we got coming up on the schedule?
Well, as with most things Time Lord Victorious, we have changes and paradoxes and things that were going to happen that now didn't and never existed. But what we think we are going to be reviewing next week would include...
We know on these. These are certain. These are certain. It's
Mostly.
Beyond that, we don't know.
We have Tales of the Dark Times number 3, which is the newest installment from the Doctor Who comic maker, which I'll throw a plug out there for that and say, if you guys aren't playing with this, you really need to. It's just a lot of fun. We have Monstrous Beauty, number 3, which is the continuation of the Ninth Doctor and Rose and the Vampires comic book story. And then we have The Enemy of My Enemy, which is a Big Finish audio, and we think the next one in line for it's the 8th Doctor, correct?
Yeah, 8th Doctor and Daleks.
Yes.
Yep.
So the continuation of the 8th Doctor's part of this. And those will all be things that we are reviewing. And then we are going to take a week off for Thanksgiving. So there will be no new content from us that week. And hopefully that'll give us a chance to let some of the Time Lord Victorious items kind of pile back up, as it were. So
yep.
We'll have more for you afterwards.
And we are quite aware that Daleks, the first episode, drops this week. But that is one of the things that we're going to put off. We're going to kind of group those up after Thanksgiving. So hang on, we'll get to them. Don't start yelling at us going, hey, where's Daleks episode 1?
You know you're going to want to revisit them anyway, so watch them now, and then when we go review them, rewatch them. That's
right, exactly. And be sure to check out our website for any updates, travelingthevortex.com. We'll be sure to keep you up to date on what we're doing. I think Sean is working up some paradoxical scheduling as well for you, so be sure to go there and read those. If you get any value out of this podcast, why not put some value back into it by clicking on the Patreon link on the website. Consider supporting us. Thank you to those who always are. We appreciate it. Also consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast. Every little bit helps, and make sure you join in the conversation on our listeners forum on Facebook. Anything else we need to do before we close this show?
Quick congratulations to the 5-ish fangirls who had their 300th episode this week.
Yay! Congratulations,
congratulations.
Lady.
Big landmark for them.
Yeah. All right, if that's going to do it, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
No, I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you. Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.